Wie führe ich meine?
How do I conduct my interviews? First of all, there is no questionnaire to guide my interview. I use techniques and use them to respond flexibly to what I am told. Of course, I always keep the project topic in mind, but otherwise, I'm relatively flexible in responding to my counterpart, more precisely, to their stories. And how do we get to the stories now? So I have this interview with a woman. She's a mother of a son who has a lot of problems with learning in school, especially with English. And it's all about learning. I ask her first, what does learning mean to you? To your son, to your family, and then she tells me. And then I ask, how and when does learning take place? So I ask about certain routines, but also certain special moments, so things that she can remember. And with that question, she's thinking. And she lists what she can think of. She mentions that they study together very often in the afternoons and on Sunday. She mentions that they bought and tried different textbooks, and even that she also hired a tutor for a few months. That didn't help much, though. She also mentions that she has often talked to teachers about her son and to other parents. So for me, it shows here, there's a whole spectrum of stories that I can potentially go deeper into with her. And my task now is to reconstruct one or the other story together with her. Because I know there were unsolved problems in the stories, but also interesting solutions on her part. Both can inspire for me for the project. And in doing that, I take an intuitive approach. So I ask specifically about one story or another that I think can be relevant to our project. First, we talk about the afternoons she spent learning English with her son and the conflicts. Because her son would much rather play computer games, she wants him to learn vocabulary. So she's telling her story, and my goal now is to make it our story. I have to navigate her story as an interviewer. I imagine I have to make a documentary about these learning afternoons. And the interview is now my research for that. What information do I need to direct a film? I need to be able to visualize it. So how you learned, and when? Was that on the weekend? Was this at home? Were there others involved? How did that go down? What were the moments that stuck in her mind? So I think like a documentary filmmaker. That's my technique, my mental framework to respond flexibly in the interview. I keep asking questions until the picture as a whole of the story comes together like a movie in my head. Until I know what the sequence of events was and which actors were involved. And that's just the beginning. Because now it becomes exciting. Because my interview partner has now also arrived in the story again and can remember the details. Now I listen carefully. Every detail that I stumble across while listening can be important. For example, a statement where I hear strong emotions coming out. Where did she feel the stress or desperation of learning? However, I also come across statements that need explanation to me. For example, she says throughout the story, it was a constant struggle with vocabulary learning. But then at some point, his grades surprisingly improved. I stumble over this statement. At some point, his grades got surprisingly better. What do you mean by surprisingly? Now I ask. And I do so by mirroring your answer as a question. I say to her, at some point, his grades got surprisingly better. And she says, yeah, he got a lot better, orally. And I say, why? And she's thinking, either the studying helped, or he just got more practice from speaking. And I probe again, more practice by speaking. And she says, yeah, I've heard him speak English at home more often now in the last year. And I ask, for what reason? And to that she says, yes, online with the headset on. So he's then playing computer games with others around the world. And right there she says this one sentence that stuck with me. She says, no offense to your textbooks, but he learned English through his first-person shooters. And it's not like that was a statement that she had ready for the interview. She only realized that in the course of her own story. What was I doing? I stumble upon the twist in the story. Surprisingly, her son got better at English. And then I ask repeatedly, first by mirroring her answers as questions, such as, at some point his grades surprisingly got better. And second, by asking why. Why did that happen? Why does she think that? For what reason? And all of these questions serve to make sure that we take the pace out right at this point in the story and go deeper. That she knows I'm interested in details now. I want to hear the reasons for her behavior. Once I understand what she means, once I've come to an inspiring statement, then only then does it go further for me in the story. Then I tell her, okay, then how did it go from there? And so we get through the story until we then change the subject, get into another story. It's only through stories that I get to unusual details. And only through details do I find inspiration for my projects. That's how the techniques I use in my interviews work.